Welcome to Let's Talk Near Death, the podcast show where we talk about life, death, and experiences somewhere in between. My name is Kirsty Salisbury, the host of the show, and I welcome you to join me as I talk to everyday people with not so everyday experiences. You may also wish to join the conversation on the Let's Talk Near Death Facebook page or access additional VIP content as a premium subscriber via Patreon. For just a couple of dollars a month, you can get an early access to episodes, additional bonus content, and your chance to connect with my guests. To do so, simply visit patreon.com/Kirsty Salisbury. Let's talk near death.
I just thought, I'm dying. This is what it feels like to die. Right at that moment, I popped out of my body. I felt myself up above me, but I saw myself down below. And then just like that, I was in the tunnel and right back into my body through the top of my head.
Welcome back to the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. Today I'm joined by Jane Thompson, who had a profound near-death experience in 2008. It was while she was in the emergency room following a sudden illness. She recalls leaving her body and being in spirit form and returning back to this lifetime. Today, Jane is an international speaker, a medium, and an intuitive healer. Jane, welcome to Let's Talk Near Death. It's great to have you here.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about your experience. What was happening for you at the time of your NDE and what came about back then?
My NDE was on August 22nd, 2008 at 1:20 p.m. I had just turned 34. That was just after my birthday. And I was in the hospital. I was taken in early that morning. They didn't know what was wrong with me. They were still trying to do some diagnostic testing, and I wasn't receiving any treatment. But what had happened is I had a kidney stone that became lodged in my ureter. So everything that the kidneys typically flush out was going back into my system, and my entire blood supply had become infected. My internal organs were starting to fail, and I was in septic shock. And I had just come out of a CAT scan, and I was in the emergency room waiting area, waiting for them to come and tell me what was next. And that's when it all happened.
All right, that must have been pretty painful.
It was very painful. I wasn't on any type of pain medications at that time because they didn't know what was wrong. And so they didn't know how to treat me. And it was horrific pain. And I've had a child, so I've been through childbirth, and that was painful. I will say septic shock is horribly painful. I would not wish that on anyone.
No, neither. That just sounds so bad. So when you say that's when it all happened, what happened?
Well, there was a progression toward the actual exiting of my body. I remember that everything around me became very amplified. The lights felt really bright, and the noises were very loud. And it was almost as if I couldn't take any more of the man-made or the physical world. I was just really disconnecting from it. And I remember there were some children in a little waiting area that was across the hall. And I remember thinking, oh, they're so loud. I wish someone could shut the door or just make it a little quieter. And a family member that was there with me, she said, they're really not being that loud. They're really great kids. And so I was the only one that was experiencing these really loud noises. And at that point, I went completely internal, and I completely disconnected from the external world. And I felt like I was inside my body doing an internal scan from head to toe. And it was like I was watching a movie that you might see in health class when you were back in school
Mm.
because I could see everything in such great detail. I felt like I could see my internal organs and the cells and all the structures. And I remember thinking at that point, I'm dying. And I had a peace about that. It didn't bother me to have that thought. I just thought, I'm dying. This is what it feels like to die. And then I backed off from that for a second and I thought, no, I'm not dying. But then I got pulled right back in and I thought, yes, I'm dying. This is what it feels like to die. And right at that moment, I popped out of my body and all of the pain was immediately gone. And I was in a great deal of pain and I had a really high temperature of 106 degrees. And all of that was just like that, gone.
Mm.
And I was looking down at my body on the hospital gurney, and I saw a couple of family members around me, and I saw some doctors and nurses and the hospital staff. And I remember just looking at it from an observer's perspective. And at first, I had to reorient because I felt myself up above me, but I saw myself down below. And it took a minute to get oriented and to really understand what was going on. And so after I reoriented myself and I realized what was going on, it didn't bother me at all. You would think that looking at yourself dead would bother you, but it didn't. It didn't. It didn't scare me. It was just almost a matter of fact of, oh, there I am. I died and I'm no longer in my body. And immediately or almost immediately, I started floating backwards and it was very slow. It was very gentle. And I eventually saw what I believe was the top of the hospital, but I didn't see the building itself and I didn't see the roof. I just saw activity and I just saw souls, just like little bundles of energy just bouncing around and being active. And I continued to float backwards. And then I felt for a moment like maybe I was in what you may think of as space because it got a little bit dark, but it wasn't scary. And then just like that, I was in the tunnel and it was really fast movement through the tunnel. And it was kind of like a roller coaster ride. It was kind of exhilarating. It was a little bit fun.
Yeah.
It wasn't dark. It wasn't scary. It was exciting because even though it was so quick, I had this feeling of, oh, I wonder what's next. I really felt like I was looking forward to what was coming next. And as soon as I came out of the tunnel, I was immediately in that bright, white, loving light. And I just basked in it. I just bathed in it. It felt like it was all around me and through me. It just became a part of me. And I had never experienced that kind of love, the unconditional love. It felt like anything that I had done in my life that wasn't quite right or wasn't good or acceptable. Um, I wasn't, it was okay. It was just safe. And I felt like I was being healed. I felt like any trauma I had ever experienced or any wounds that were left open were just instantly being healed by this light and this love. And I just took it all in and it felt warm and it just felt very replenishing would be the word that I would use to describe it. And I was amazed by the amount of love and the amount of peacefulness and calm.
And were you alone at this point, or were there people with you, or what was around you? What could you physically see with your eyes?
I couldn't see anything with my eyes other than this bright white light. I felt the presence of, I think we all have different names. I would say the presence of God, or the presence of the divine, the presence of source, where we all originally came from. I felt that presence, which was that white light. Um, and I started to feel what I thought were my loved ones starting to come in around me, but I didn't have a chance to connect, because right at that moment, I heard that inaudible voice tell me that I needed to go back.
Oh,
And I didn't want, that's not what I wanted to hear.
yeah.
And I protested. I don't know if I was actually shaking my head, but it sure felt like I was. No, that please, please don't make me go back. And I heard the voice, the inaudible voice, one more time. You need to go back. And just like that, I was back in the tunnel and right back into my body through the top of my head.
Oh, wow. So do you remember going back into your body? Do you remember what that
I
was like?
I do. It was almost like I got sucked back into my body. It was
Yeah.
so quick and it was so abrupt. But that's the best way I could describe it. Just like I got sucked back in through the top of my head.
Mm, mm. And you talked about how you could feel your relatives with you.
When I was in the light, or do you
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, sorry. When you're in the light, you could feel your relatives with you, but you couldn't connect with them. Did you have any idea of how many there were?
It felt like a crowd coming in. And I
Yeah.
don't even know that it was necessarily all relatives, but it felt like people that I had been connected to in my lifetime. And so it did feel like a crowd lovingly, gently approaching me. Um, but I didn't have a chance to connect, because that's when I immediately heard, you need to go back. And so
Mm.
it was almost like I snapped out of that peaceful state. Um, and so I wasn't able to connect with what was going on.
Yeah, wow. And the journey that you went on back through the tunnel to come back down, was that pretty much the same as the journey that you went on to get up there? Did it feel the same?
No, it didn't feel the same. It was much quicker. I don't remember details of it. It was a split second, it felt like.
Right. Yeah. And then when you woke up, you're obviously still in the hospital, waking up. What was going through your mind? Did you remember this straight away?
Well, I remember briefly waking up when I first came back into my body, and I was in such tremendous pain. I think I blacked out, because the next thing that I really remember is much later that evening. I was in pre-op, down in one of the lower levels of the hospital, and I opened my eyes and I felt very peaceful internally, but I was very aware of the chaotic energy that was around me. And this was very late at night. I think this was around 10 or 11 p.m. And
Mm.
so not that many people were in pre-op at that point. But I do remember the people that were there were very concerned. I could see that on their faces. And I was receiving last rites when I woke up.
Wow.
And I wasn't able to communicate verbally at that point. But what I wanted to say, if I could have said it, was, what's everybody so worried about? If I were going to die, it would have happened earlier today. I'm going to be okay. I'm supposed to be back. I'm supposed to be here.
Oh, I
Um,
love it.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
So I love hearing this because this is how I felt when I had my experience as well. And I had tubes everywhere, and I was saying, oh, get these things out of me. I don't need them now. I'm going to be okay, because I knew that I was going to be absolutely fine.
mhm.
So did you have the same feeling that you wouldn't go back there, that you're healed and it was all going to work out how it should work out?
I did. And I had a peacefulness about it. Even though I protested coming back, I still felt like this is just the way it's meant to be. This is what's meant for me. And I accepted it. but I felt very disconnected from this physical world and from this physical plane. Like you said, all the tubes and everything, and the IV and the heart monitors. I anything that was man-made, it was puzzling to me. I wasn't integrating back in very quickly.
So what was life like for those first few days?
I was in the hospital and I was in a lot of pain. And even though I was on some pretty intense pain medications, it was a very difficult time. But I remember the very next morning, my surgeon came into the room, and I remember feeling great. I felt peaceful, and my fever had come down, so my body felt better. Um, and when he came in to talk to me, I will never forget the look in his eyes. I've never seen, almost makes me tear up a little bit. I've never seen someone look at me like that. It was really a look of, I think he thought I was going to die still. I've never seen someone look at me like that, but I told him that I felt great. I was like, oh, I feel great. Everything's wonderful. And he looked at me and he said, Jane, your temperature is down to 94 degrees. What happens over the next 24 hours is critical. And we don't need to get into the science of it, but when your temperature dips that low, you are probably going into organ failure, which I didn't understand at the time. But I was feeling so good, I just kind of brushed it off because, again, I had that peacefulness of, here I am. This is where I'm going to be. So I don't know if that really answered your question. I went off on a
Yeah, no,
tangent a
it
little bit.
does. It does. I find it so interesting this. I'm here because I'm meant to be. So were you talked about how it was very difficult when you heard the words you need to go back, and your first thought was no, I want to fight this. I want to stay. What has changed significantly since your experience?
Everything has changed significantly. I still have my personality and my areas that I can improve on. But I would say the thing that has changed the most dramatically is my capacity for love. I think that when we have NDEs, we all get exactly what we need out of it. And I needed love. I the situation that I grew up in was challenging and there was some trauma, and I really needed to experience love. I needed my heart to be opened up to that so I could then learn how to give love. And that's the way my life changed the most profoundly. And that doesn't mean that I'm perfect. I'm still human, and I still have my
Yeah.
areas that I'm learning from. But my spiritual beliefs broadened, I would say, and they are still evolving and changing as I continue to grow and learn. Um, and I think something that's really interesting about people who have had that experience of going into the light, I think the majority of us would say that it's always on the forefront and we kind of revisit it often. I think I revisit it daily at least. And I think the more we go back into that light, the more we're exposed to healing. And so we're still on this sometimes rapid healing journey. And so because of that, I'm constantly changing. Sometimes I can't even keep up with myself.
I love it. That's so good. What about in terms, you said that your spiritual beliefs have changed quite a bit. What about in terms of, did you come back with any specific purpose or spiritual gifts or feeling that you had to achieve a certain thing or live a certain way?
I was not given a purpose. I wish that that would have been wrapped up in a little box and handed to me. It was not. I had some things to learn first, and navigate and heal before it was time for me to know why I came back. But immediately came back with heightened sensitivities. You know, I am an empath for sure. And that is a direct result of my NDE. I was having immediate mediumship
Wow.
experiences. I was very aware of other people's energies and energies around me and how I could kind of move them if I chose to,
Mm-hmm.
which was all completely foreign to me. I thought I had lost my mind. And so the first, probably at least the first 2 years, maybe the first 3 years after my NDE, I really struggled with that because I wanted life to go back to normal because I didn't know how to navigate these spiritual gifts
Mm.
that had come on as a result of the NDE. And I didn't know how to hone them, because really I always say after an NDE you get blown wide open,
Mm.
and part of the process of integrating back into the physical world is learning how to manage those gifts, and I really struggled with that for the first couple of years.
Is it something which is a bit easier now?
A lot easier now.
So
Yeah,
what
I
was it that made it easier?
I worked on it. I
Yeah.
really worked on it. And one of the things that consistently helps me is trying to keep my vibration high and trying not to get too pulled down or too enmeshed in other people's energies and things that they have going on. Really
Mm.
working with energetic and spiritual boundaries is what helped me the most. And that's something that takes time, and it really takes some effort and practice. And I still need to work with that. I still have my days where it's not quite as easy as others, but I'm learning more and more each day and fine tuning it more and more each day. And I'm strong in it now, strong to the point where I can work with others and do readings and healing work. And I'm able to um, protect myself while I work with them.
Mm.
And that was something I had to learn over time, how to do that.
Yeah. So all of this has come out of your experience, is what you've said.
Yes. Yeah. My
Yeah.
life before this was 180 degrees different than what it is
Oh,
now.
I love it. I love it when I hear that. It's so great. So you spoke briefly about understanding why this happened. Do you have any understanding as to why this happened to you?
Well, um, I needed to experience that love. I needed my
Mm.
heart to feel that, um, because it increased my capacity to give love. I think that's what's at the core. And then after I was able to experience that, to overflow that to others and help others heal, um, so they can then experience that as deeply as they can while we're here in these bodies.
Mm. So I understand that you're using a lot of these gifts in the work that you're doing today, and that you've created the white light solution.
I did. Almost right after my NDE, I knew that I needed to, I just intuitively knew, and I didn't know exactly what it was, but I knew that I needed to find a way to bring that white light into everyone's lives on a daily basis. And I didn't quite know how to do it. And it's taken me years to figure it out and to form it in a way where people can have that white light on demand, in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I had to figure out how to work with energy. And um, so I formed the white light solution, and it's a monthly program where I do a guided meditation and a video teaching. And it's a different topic each month. Like this month, we're talking about intuition. But what it ultimately is it's healing work. And with each meditation and with each video, that white light is coming through so you can access it as needed. And I wasn't sure how to do that with pre-recorded
Yeah.
information. And it really just evolved over time because as I had done public speaking, people would tell me that they felt like when they heard me talk, they were receiving a healing. And it was because what I was doing as I would prepare to speak, I would really kind of channel that white light through and try to fill the room up with it. And so they really were receiving a healing. And so my goal was to figure out how I could do that with pre-recorded information so people could have it at their fingertips whenever they needed it.
And so does that work? Does it just come through regardless of whether it's recorded live or pre-recorded or how you're listening to it?
Yes. And I don't understand it. I don't get it. It's very abstract and I don't know how it works, but it's happening somehow.
Yeah.
And so I just trust it. And that's even the feedback that I get from people who are doing the program. And so I just say thank you. I'm glad that somehow a power greater than us is definitely
Yeah.
helping that along.
Yeah. And I love that. I often don't know how things work either, but somehow they do. And I think there's some things we just don't need to know how it all works. We just need to be the ones to go forward with things.
I think we're very limited by our brains and our bodies and our vocabularies. And there are just some things that we just can't explain, and that's okay.
Jane Thompson, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your experience. And I'm so fascinated by the way that this light has impacted you. So you were in the light, immersed in the light, and then now you're able to channel that light down here. I encourage all of our listeners to go and check out Jane's site, which is safehandshealing.com. And Jane, thank you once again, and we wish you all the very best.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Let's Talk Near Death podcast show. If you've enjoyed it, please share it with your friends, tell people about it. I'd love to get these messages out there. Don't forget you can also pick up your VIP access pass for additional content at patreon.com/Kirsty Salisbury. You can connect with us via the Let's Talk Near Death Facebook page, and I look forward to catching you for another episode soon.